Well, usually it's other royal family members that are in the news, whether it be Harry or Meghan, whether it be Princess of Wales or Prince William or King Charles and Queen Camilla. But this last week, we actually had Princess Anne in the news. She apparently suffered or had an accident on one of her properties. It was apparently kicked by a horse and she suffered a concussion. She's recovering from this, the last reports that I read. So I was actually very interested to see what kind of astrological energies would be operating when we have something like an accident that occurs. So we're going to be looking at Princess Anne's chart. We're going to be specifically looking at the planetary timelines. We're going to be looking at relevant transits. So this should be quite informative. I do plan on doing a deeper dive of Princess Anne's chart in another video. We're going to be more focused on the current situation in the near term future. So again, this should be quite interesting for those of you that follow the royal family. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. I practice Vedic sidereal astrology, which is astrology from ancient India. Your sign may be different using this method. If you're new to this, you'll see actually the chart looks a little different than a Western tropical chart, but we get a lot of information about it. If you're interested in a personal private reading, check down below for details in the description box. And I just want to remind you all, this astrological reading of Princess Anne, this is for entertainment purposes only. I am just speculating and it's my interpretation of the astrological energies. So let's go ahead and take a look at Princess Anne's chart for a moment. And let me put that on stage here. And actually, I can change it, probably change the view we have here. A few things I want to point out before we begin is she's a Libra ascendant, and she's got her moon in the sign of Leo. She's got a lot of things happening in sign of Leo. She got 3 planets there. We got Mercury and Saturn. We're going to be talking a lot about Saturn here because it's the mahadasha that she's in. But one of the things I want to point out is she's got Mars in the first house, and Mars in the first house can create somebody that's very athletic, very competitive. I think she's been known that she's very blunt. She's very direct in how she talks to people, and that would be Mars in the first house. She also has this very sporting nature. Apparently, she's been in horse riding, involved with it for a very long time. I read something about the Olympics in the 1970s. Maybe those of you that know about this could comment down below. But she's quite active, and that would be Mars in the first house. Let's talk about the planetary period right now that she's in. In Vedic astrology, we have something called the Vimshatari Dasha. I call them planetary timelines, just so people can know, what it is. And there's a calculator here with the software program that I'm using. So she's in a Saturn major period, which is called Saturn mahadasha. And if you can see, you probably can't see, but she's in this period, and we'll talk about timelines in a moment. Saturn's 19 years long, so these mahadashas can be very long periods of time. But we do get more information with the sub period, which is called antardasha, which is going to be Venus. So we're going to talk about it. Do Saturn and Venus, what do they represent? What kind of energies do they represent? How does it relate to this recent event? And then also we're going to look at the near future with this, with all of this, of course. Now, if we look at the astrology chart, when you're in a planetary time period like Saturn and Venus, we're really going to be focusing on the energies. Like what does Saturn represent? And then what does Venus represent in the astrology chart? Because those energies during planetary timelines, they're magnified, they're intensified. They're really what's downloading your karma to you. So remember, in Vedic astrology, we talk about karma quite a bit. So the idea is that nothing happens by accident in our lives. There's always a karmic cause. Whether you're in a little fender bender or something like that, there's a karmic cause through the law of cause and effect and how karma works. So let's go ahead and talk about Saturn mahadasha. So we're going to focus in on Saturn here. The first thing you're going to notice, it's in the 11th house of Leo. It's with Mercury. It's with Moon. We're going to kind of dissect a lot of this right now. It rules the 5th house. It rules the 4th house. And we'll break that down. Let's go ahead and bring up the slide for you. I already brought up this slide, so let's talk about the next slide. So Saturn Mahadasha, it's 19 years long. It's actually a really long time period, but it's going to give us some general energies about what's going on in Princess Anne's life. So between 2016 and 2035, which is a 19-year period, she's in Saturn Mahadasha. And Saturn represents, like I say in the slide, it represents heavy karma. It represents seriousness, responsibility, fears, karmic debts. It's usually the negative karma that we're paying back in this current lifetime. It can represent isolation, penance, cold places, duty, rigidness, elderly persons. So, Saturn is associated with old age. So when they're getting up there in years and they're in the Saturn period, they actually really are feeling it. So, I'm sure with whatever happened with this recent accident, maybe it's something that it wasn't as likely to happen when she was younger, because Saturn, what it does is it kind of like slows us down. It kind of increases that feeling of the aging process. That's of course speculative, but Saturn definitely is related to heavy karma. It's in the 11th house, which in itself is not bad. So the 11th house represents gains, friends, networks. That's not bad in and of itself. It's conjunct Mercury and Moon. So let's talk about that for a second, because when a planet is conjunct other planets, and I'm pulling up the chart again for you all, it takes on the flavor of those planets. So she's in a Saturn period, but Saturn's being influenced by Mercury and it's being influenced by Moon. So if we look at Moon, Moon is activating the 10th house. It's the 10th Lord. Again, so 10th house would be like public responsibilities. She's been in the public eye quite a bit recently. I think she was out there for Trooping the Color. So she's still very public, royal duties, all of that's being activated with Saturn. But if we look at Mercury right here, Mercury, it activates the 9th house over here. And let me draw it really big. And then the 12th house over here. And the thing about the 12th house in particular, the 9th house is kind of like religion, gurus, teachers, father figures. But the 12th house is more about like losses, loss of vitality. So a loss of vitality there. It can represent hospitalization, by the way. So hospitals, that's kind of being activated. So Mercury is, it's influencing what Saturn's doing. So we already have that 12th Lord aspect to this, which definitely could cause a hospitalization. However, typically I would say the 12th Lord isn't really one of those houses that create like an accident by itself. Usually the 12th house is kind of more of a fading away energy when I notice it. But we will see very shortly here. I'm going to point out that there's some actually very powerful other energies that could cause sudden accidents, which we're going to be looking at. Let me go ahead and pull up the next slide here. Saturn is the 4th and 5th Lord that we talked about. That represents houses, estates, children, creative endeavors. But we have to look at the moon chart as well when we're looking at this, because the moon chart becomes increasingly more important after the age of 50. So we don't want to just look at the 11th house and the 4th and 5th house. We want to look at, okay, where is it in the moon chart? And the moon chart is really simple to calculate. Basically, it's just you make the moon your first house, and then you treat it like a normal chart. So, like I said, after the age of 50, it becomes increasingly more powerful. So if I was to, and let me go ahead and show you how we do that. If you're new to this, what we would do is just make that the first house, and then we would just count and make these other houses just like that's the ascendant. Okay. Now in the moon chart, and we're going to call this the moon chart. If we look at Saturn, Saturn rules the 6th house, 6 from moon, and then it rules 7th from moon. Now, this is where, when the 6th house is activated, this is when we can see some things like accidents, disharmony. We can definitely see some issues there. So that's the first indication. So sometimes I've noticed when someone's running a period of the 6th Lord, it can be like someone gets into like a small accident or something like that. Definitely. I mean, the 6th Lord is definitely its potential. Now, when it's devastating, usually the 8th Lord is involved. Let's go ahead and pull up the other slide here. So, like I said, it rules 6th and 7th from moon. 6th house can be related to disease, disharmony, injuries. For example, accidents can happen during periods of the sixth lord and eighth lord. Usually it's more catastrophic if it's during a period of the eighth lord. But we will actually see the eighth house is involved during this time as well. So that's kind of actually a little bit spooky with how many houses. We got the 12th house. We got 6 from moon activated. That's already kind of difficult. Let's go ahead and talk about the next time period, which is Venus. So if we look at Venus right now, Venus is in the 10th house. Again, Venus in the 10th house is not bad. It's public visibility. Venus itself is generally a good planet. But, let's look at what it rules. It rules the first house, so that's good, but it rules the 8th house. Remember I just told you, like, when you have sudden accidents or like very catastrophic sudden things, it can happen during a period of the 8th lord. And so Venus is running and it's the 8th lord. It rules the 8th house. Also, it's activating Mars over here. So she's got this ambition. She wants to go sport. She wants to go ride horses. She still really wants to do that, of course. And let me clean up the chart before we go to the next slide, just so I don't have to do it when we get back to it. So Venus, antardasha, by the way, this is the smaller time period. It lasts from February 2023 to April 2026. It's a little over 3 years. So she's about, over a year into this. It's in the 10th house, career responsibilities. We just talked about that with Saturn. And then Mars is being activated. By the way, Mars is known for breaking things. So Mars is a tricky energy. It's a tricky planet. It doesn't rule bad houses necessarily in Princess Anne's chart. I think it rules if I remember, the 2nd house and the 7th house. They're not necessarily bad houses. But Mars itself, the energy can be involved with breaking things. 8th lord is being activated, sudden accidents, surprising event. So this can be a very tricky energy. And the reason why I'm calling it tricky is because Venus rules the 1st house, which is the body, which it would generally be good. So usually your ascendant lord is a very positive planet, but then it rules the 8th house. So it's just double whammy there. And we're going to talk about the eclipses. So let me go ahead and put the chart up again here. And we keep switching this around. Now, let me see where Venus is in the moon chart really quick. So Venus is, the other thing I wanted to point out, which I forgot to include in the slide, is when you're looking at a mahadasha and an antardasha, what you want to do is you want to look at the angle between the mahadasha lord and the angle between the antardasha lord, and that gives you more description of what's going on as well. So let's take a look at that, because that does give us more information. So let me go ahead and pull up the chart again. So if we make, for example, you can make any house in your chart, the 1st house, to kind of get more information about what's going on. So Saturn, remember, it's a mahadasha of Saturn. So that's the ruling planet of this whole time period, this 19-year time period. Well, if we count, and I'm just going to say 1, 2, 3, ... Okay. I think you all know this is 12th from moon. So Venus is 12 houses from moon. This gives us a little bit information because you want to look at the angle between the mahadasha lord and the antardasha lord. 12 houses is the angle. Remember how I said 12 houses? 12th house can be representing a loss of vitality, hospitalization, spiritual pursuits. Now, she could channel this energy to spiritual pursuits, but I think that because Mars is active, she just wants to really get out and still be doing her thing. However, Saturn is showing, that age definitely can be catching up. Saturn, by the way, it shows us our limitations. So it's the planet of, essentially, there's an old adage of, if you go to the cemetery, there's a king there in one plot, and then, there could be a commoner or whoever, but we all end up in the same place essentially during this life. That's what Saturn is. Saturn is like, there's equality with that kind of basic sense of human nature. So Saturn makes us realize our human nature, how fragile we are. Really, we are. We're really fragile. And so it brings up this sense of limitation. So things like aging are going to be something that it might really dawn on us one day. Like, wow, I feel like I'm getting old. And that's what Saturn can do. Let's look at the eclipses. I did want to bring that up. So Saturn's here. Or sorry, the chart is here. The eclipses, this is also kind of disturbing as well. I mean, I have to bring this up too. Remember the eclipses that happened on March 25th and then April 8th? This was likely part of the trigger of some of these energies, by the way. You'll notice it's happening on the 6-12 axis. This is a difficult eclipse season for those of you that are Libra ascendant because it's activating the 6th house and the 12th house. Remember I talked about 6th house can represent conflict, accidents, 12th house, loss of energy, hospitalization, those kind of things, 12th house, isolation. So the eclipses just happened on that, and the eclipses can affect the next 3 to 6 months. We're still in that eclipse window if you want to think about it. And then, not to mention the next set of eclipses, which are going to be happening in September and October. Well, they're going to be happening in the same houses here. They're going to be happening in the 6th house and the 12th house. Again, this is a time that if I was advising Princess Anne, I'd say this is a time to be really careful. You got a lot of things going on. You're in a Saturn period, first of all. You're in a Venus period, which is activating the 8th house. I mean, usually Venus is known as this like happy planet, but it's activating the 8th lord. And then we got these eclipses that are happening on the 6 and 12 axis. This is like a difficult time. Like this is not a time to risk it right now. I would definitely say it's not a time to risk it, and especially during this transit, the Rahu transit, which going through the 6th house here, the Rahu transit through the 6th house. And by the way, she's having a Rahu return. I forgot to bring that up. The Rahu transit that started October 2023, and that's going to last until May of 2025. So again, this could create issues here, health issues especially with the 6th lord, with the 6th house being activated. She's got to be really careful. And then if we look at the moon chart, I think it was also some tough houses in the moon chart. Let's go look over there for a moment. The moon chart, look at this. The eclipse axis is the 8th house and the 2nd house. So 8th from moon, Rahu's transiting 8th from moon. So this is definitely a very tricky period. She's in this Venus period of the 8th lord, remember, till 2026. So she's still smack dab in the middle of this. And then these eclipses are just making it more difficult. So, she should definitely think about taking it easy and not pushing the envelope. I wish her a really good recovery during this time. The good thing about Venus is Venus can create a lot of love and affection around you. She's got Venus in the 10th house, which could show there's a lot of public support. And from everything I've heard about Princess Anne, she's one of the general favorites. People love Princess Anne. They like her personality, how she's very blunt, how she's not afraid to speak her mind. So I wish Princess Anne a very good recover, but I would tell her, be careful over this especially until next year, because these eclipses can really be causing some problems. Let me know down below what you think. Please comment, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you very much.